Naples, in the heart of the city itself, watching and waiting for the next signs of unrest. Vesuvius was also the first volcano that I personally encountered during a family holiday to the Amalfi Coast in 1987. At the tender age of 10, I had no idea of its long significance for volcano science, nor did I have any inkling of how important volcanoes would come to be in my own life. In fact, my recollection of this first sortie into volcanic terrain is rather hazy. I should perhaps not admit that, of my many memories of that holiday, it is the hotel's outdoor pool, which, thanks to the relatively cool October temperatures, my sister and I had largely to ourselves, that is probably my clearest recollection through the mists of time, despite the many more profound experiences of that week. But fragments of memory, old photos, and a dog-eared holiday diary do recall our visit to the volcano's summit, a short plod from the car park. A large, deep, sheer-sided crater, wafts of smoke clinging to its walls, layers of different-coloured lava, and a nervousness about the mountain's potentially destructive nature. Although Vesuvius has been quiet since the 1940s, to give credit to my younger self, this anxiety was wholly logical based on the facts before me. Prior to our ascent, we had visited Pompeii and Herculaneum, both overwhelmed by the infamous AD 79 eruption of the very mountain upon which we stood. The visits to these ruins had marked a vivid impression on me, more so really than the dusty trek up the mountain. The death casts of Vesuvius's victims, created by injecting plaster of Paris into the voids left in the volcanic debris once their remains had decayed away, on display at Pompeii, made their experiences painfully corporeal. Hands often clasped to their faces as they attempted to flee, or curled up in a vain reflex to protect themselves against the searing inundation. The grandeur and sophistication of these societies were wiped away in just a couple of days. What remained imprinted on my mind was the destructive power of the now inert and seemingly immutable rock. Rock that had once erupted with sufficient fervour to engulf these places. But above all else, it was the fear and distress twisted into the bodies of the people it claimed that stayed with me following this first brief brush with Volcanoland. The AD 79 eruption of Vesuvius was by no means unprecedented, but nonetheless it took the local population largely by surprise. Just over a century earlier, the Greek thinker Strabo had noted the similarities between the rocks of Vesuvius and those erupting from Mount Etna in Sicily. But Vesuvius had been inactive for centuries prior to AD 79, and so was not considered a threat. There is evidence that this catastrophe was not unheralded, however. A large earthquake hit the region in AD 62, causing significant damage to local towns and killing hundreds of sheep in the district around Pompeii. These livestock were poisoned, according to the account of the Roman philosopher Seneca, by breathing atmosphere tainted by the poison of the internal fires, possibly, as we know now, volcanic carbon dioxide seeping to the surface from underground magma. Minor tremors continued to shake the region after this, but the locals became accustomed to them. In the days before the eruption, these tremors increased in strength and were accompanied by other ominous portents, such as springs and wells running dry. Within the mountain, the magma was rising. Today, the association between these symptoms and an impending eruption is far better understood. But this is knowledge that has been honed over centuries of data collection and rock analysis. Much understanding has, poignantly perhaps, been gleaned from Vesuvius itself. One of my favourite tales of experimentation with new methods of volcano monitoring at Vesuvius is that of Frank Perrett, an American engineer who travelled to Italy for his health and became enraptured by the mountain. In the days prior to Vesuvius's 1906 eruption, he found that he could hear a continuous buzzing from below when he set his upper teeth against his iron bedstead. Perrett had transformed his own skull into a crude